Welcome to Theater for Social Change, an introduction by Esther Banegas Catica for Glug Fellowship 2020-2021. Hi, my name is Esther. I'm very pleased that you picked Theater for Social Change and that you're interested in this topic. Hopefully, this brief video essay introduction to the originators and the key practices of Theater for Social Change will encourage you to pursue more information about this awesome theater discipline. Let's take a look. Your expectations. You will receive a brief introduction to the creation and practice of theater for social change. The goal of this course is to inform you of its originators and specific terms used in this world. The objectives. The main objective is to invite you into the basics of this socially aware performing arts practice, hoping to intrigue you enough to discover more. This workshop is relevant to any participant in life because it shows the power of socially aware theater practices and the impact it can have on our mental, physical, and social well-being. Theater for Social Change is a performance ensemble theater technique to raise awareness about the impact of social issues through community engagement process. It is a theater practice that wishes to build the bridges of better communication among individuals and communities, bringing self and social awareness to the forefront at its core. That's why there are several self-assessment quizzes in your study packet that you can have access to so that you are self-aware of your place in society, so that when you are doing theater for social change practices, you can bring that awareness into the field and with the people that you are doing theater for social change with. Theater for social change is also an evolving discipline that has many originators and branches with a varied history. Let's start exploring some of the key creators and their concepts. Paulo Freire was a Brazilian educator and philosopher who wrote the book Pedagogy of the Oppressed. In this book, he explained the relationship between the oppressed and the oppressor, and explained the importance of a dialogical approach to teaching where student and teachers are equals and it's not hierarchical. What that necessarily means is most of us, especially in the American education system, are very used to a teacher explaining things to you as I am now, and the students just taking notes and trying to learn as best as they can. But in a dialogical approach, which you can maybe see later when you are in grad school or in different countries and disciplines, that's when the teacher poses questions and leaves the floor open to discussion so that there is a equal understanding and an actual dialogue. So that's the dialogical approach. And Paulo Freire was very adamant of making sure that that was the way that he taught and educated while he was trying to develop his techniques. That's a picture of Paulo Freire. In Freire's approach, conscientisation means the ways in which individuals and communities develop a critical understanding of their social reality through reflection and action. This involves examining and acting on the root causes of oppression as experienced in the here and now. He also is tasked with introducing the concept of street theater. Obviously, he wasn't the only and first originator of street theater, but he was the one to connect theater for social change into the branch of street theater because guess what? For there to be social change, you need to have an audience that's in society, and the easier access to that audience that isn't in just a theater would be on the street. Next, we have Augusto Faria. He was also a Brazilian theater practitioner, drama theorist, and political activist. He was the founder of Theater of the Oppressed, a theatrical form originally used in radical left popular education movements. He was highly influenced by Paulo Freire. He wrote in his book called Theater of the Oppressed, or Teatro do Oprimido, and it is now abbreviated as TOTO, Theater of the Oppressed. This is a very famous book for most theater practices in all of the branches. It is also very tied to Bertolt Brecht, who is another theater theorist. We won't be talking about him, but if you have background in theater, the name Brecht should sound familiar, and hopefully Augusto Faria with Theater of the Oppressed should also sound familiar. But if it isn't, there you go. This is what your introduction is for. And so he basically took the teachings of Paulo Freire and started developing it more for a theater practice rather than just an educational component. The word oppressed is used in the sense of who has lost the right to express wills and needs and is reduced to the condition of obedient listener of a monologue. The need to specify why oppressed might feel like a weird word to describe the form of theater of the oppressed is that we normally don't see ourselves as victims, right? We don't think that we are being oppressed because it's such a heavy word. But in terms of this definition, it means mainly just not being aware or not having the full picture of something, and there are people who have maybe more rights than you or have more access to knowledge than you, and therefore they become, whether they want to or not, the oppressors, and those with less knowledge and less opportunities and less access to those opportunities become the oppressed. Augusto Boal, created Forum Theater, and it aims to empower marginalized groups and their allies by rehearsing creative, collaborative problem solving. This is an image that I will use to explain what forum theater is. So when we hear the word forum, we think of somebody speaking and a group of audience watching it, right? So when you see something like a TED Talk, that normally is a forum conversation. And forum theater is precisely that. You have a group of people who would be your improvisers, your troupe, or your volunteers, and they are good to go with creating scenes. And normally those scenes represent different scenarios in society that would show difficult situations that required the spectators to become actors, and for them to, instead of just suggest solutions, proactively become part of the solution by replacing one of the actors in the scene and doing the scene again. All the other actors still do what the scene originally did, but that new spectator, that new audience volunteer taking the place of one of the characters, would show what better ways to solve an issue first-hand basis. Again, in your informational packet that you're hopefully downloading as you watch this video, you will see how we break down the steps of creating forum theater. For example, let's say you make a scene where a kid is throwing a tantrum and the mom is feeling very embarrassed, and then she's getting yelled at by a store owner, and all of this scene causes chaos. You show that first scene, and then you open the floor up to discussion, and you have audience members suggest maybe the mom could have reacted differently, or maybe the store owner could have reacted differently, and you see that scene play again. It might feel like it isn't powerful enough, but it is, because the audience right then and there gets to see and learn just how important as a society we are for supporting one another and actually changing, being agents of change. Next, and our last originator and creator is Luis Valdez. He was a Chicano playwright, director, and creator of the theater company and movement called the Farm Workers Theater, or it's an original Spanish, Teatro Campesino. Luis Valdez, alongside with Cesar Chavez in the United Farmers Workers Union, created Las Dos Caras del Patroncito and Quinta Temporada. These were short plays written to encourage campesinos to leave the fields and join the Union Farmers Workers. Most famous play created by Luis Valdez was called Suit Suit. So Teatro Campesino actually still exists, and normally it was performed in the beds of trucks and anywhere where they were protesting, right, for the farmers' rights. So normally farmers didn't have access to education, so they were illiterate. So by having these plays, these short stories and scenes called actos, they were able to process the knowledge and actually learn how they were being oppressed and how to rise above that. And it's just very beautiful to see again the power of theater connected to social change and how it's a tool that is still being used and it's an education that is very much needed. So Luis Valdez was the first Chicano, which means Mexican American, to create a form of pedagogy that is a branch of theater for social change called Teatro Campesino. This is an image of those original performances back in 19 the 1960s when they first started. And as you can see, they're just wearing a mask. They're not wearing, it's not a big set, and they're wearing signs that show the names of the characters that they're playing so that they would be as obvious as possible for the audience watching. I also added this quote of Augusto Boal that says, "Theater is a form of knowledge. It should and can also be means of transforming society. Theater can help us build our future rather than just waiting for it." So, a brief recap of what we just learned from Theater for Social Change. Are you ready? Paulo Freire, who initiated through street theater, was the one who wrote Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Then Augusto Boal, heavily inspired by Pedagogy of the Oppressed, created Theater of the Oppressed, abbreviated as TOTO. And one of the many forms of Theater of the Oppressed is called Forum Theater, which is now one of the practices of Theater for Social Change. Luis Valdez was the originator of Teatro Campesino, the farm workers' theater, and it was meant to educate and empower farm workers that were protesting. So, as you can tell, all of these practices that have in common is trying to bring awareness from the oppressed to no longer be oppressed by their oppressors. And for those oppressors to maybe realize that they are being oppressors, and for those allies to hopefully realize that there's always more that you can do. Theater for Social Change is meant to encourage your well being mentally, emotionally, physically. It is meant to give you an awareness of where you are in the world and who is around you. And it is an encouraging theater practice because instead of just being a performative theater practice, it is actually a reformative theater practice that encourages people to become a better version of themselves. Theater for Social Change is a performance ensemble theater technique to raise awareness about the impact of social issues through community engagement process. Because you don't know what you don't know, right? So, hopefully with this Theater for Social Change introduction, that theater bug has bitten you and you are more curious to learn more and hit the ground running, because we need more theater for social change practitioners out there in the world to bring awareness of who we are and where we are as a society and how much we can improve. Thank you for spending your time with me and for your interest in theater for social change. Have a great day.